Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be covering the newest album from In the Woods called Pure. You know, it's kind of funny. When I was working my way through my Avenged Sevenfold review and discussing the path toward metal that I had taken, I came to the stark realization that for as much talk as I put forward about exploring more black metal, I hadn't really done as much as I would have liked to this year. And that's almost entirely on me. There were a lot of black metal records that dropped this year, and I just haven't had a chance to do my due diligence in covering them. Now, to be somewhat fair here, I also haven't gotten that many requests either. Black metal's a niche genre, and the brand of it that I tend to like is more melodic and atmospheric. That's even more niche still. And I'm still coming close to putting out more reviews in 2016 than I did last year, and possibly more than 2014, and so it's not like I haven't been busy. But still, there have been black metal albums that I've wanted to cover and haven't yet had the time to do so. So let's make up for some lost time and discuss one that's been on my radar for quite some time: In the Woods. Now, immediately out of the gate, you have to make some qualifications. When In the Woods began releasing albums in the 90s, they may have started off in black metal, but they sure as hell didn't stay there, venturing into progressive metal and blending intricate instrumentals with some impressive melodic song structures and remarkably solid lyrics. I would still probably hold their sophomore album Omnio as their strongest release, but even though I'm not exactly wild about Strange in Stereo, it was still disheartening when I was rediscovering the band last year and discovering that they hadn't released any full-length albums since. Now, thankfully, In the Woods actually did reform with new vocalist James Fogarty, and they actually released a full-length album this year, 17 years after the last one, and I really wasn't sure what to expect. Progressive metal, black metal, either way, the pedigree of this group is so strong enough it warrants one hell of a comeback. So while I am entirely too late to the punch here, how is Pure? Honestly, this is a tricky album for me to evaluate, mostly because it's not easy to place in context with In the Woods' other albums in terms of tone, sound, or even a lot of the content. As such, it makes comparisons to Omnio kinda pointless, because while I do like that record more for its experimental melodic flavor, this album is aiming to do something very different. It leans much heavier towards progressive or even doom metal than the classical or experimental black metal touches of the past. And while I definitely still like this, it was a very different experience than I was initially expecting. Still a great experience. I'm gonna recommend this album, but again, very different. And the most appropriate place to start is the instrumentation and the production, as Pure doesn't really fit with any clearly delineated genre of metal. The slower tempos, the booming drums, the grinding riffs and bass lines, the deeper, more melancholic vocals from James Fogarty, the minor tones, these imply a pretty heavy element of doom metal, but it's not nearly as ponderous as that genre can often feel. The rhythm guitars still have a lot of sizzle and a fair amount of chugging momentum, although the main riffing only really touches black metal textures on songs like Devil's at the Door, and even then it's mostly in the background. Especially when you consider the more circular, more intricate drum patterns and the lack of heavier blast beats, and that's before you get to the synth tones and the organ. This record is much more reminiscent of, say, early progressive metal, or even with some of the weirder chord progressions, hints of psychedelia. And it's pretty damn great progressive metal too, from the masterful transitions off a great melody line in the title track to the final pianos, to the rumbling drum lines playing off the stronger major chord melodies of the Recalcitrant Protagonist, the organ and bass interlude of the Cave of Dreams, the very sparse, empty soundscapes of Towards the Black Surreal, with the melodic motifs that call back to In the Woods' debut album. Really nice touch there. To the grinding swell of the final song, Mysteries of the Constellations. Hell, even if I do feel Transmission's KRS feels a little bit stretched out, the moody stretches of melody do lead to a pretty potent, languid vibe, and the liquid, borderline post-punk-esque guitar tones all across this album lend this mix a solid, rattling darkness that I could definitely get into. What it leads to is an album that certainly takes its time and has a certain deliberate tone to its approach, where everything is very carefully considered, but that also doesn't mean this album is without its flaws. For one, some of the fizzier synth tones could have used a little bit more body, and I do feel some of the oscillations could better blend with the rest of the mix, or at the very least add a little bit more distinctive character and spark from song to song. But that's a larger issue with this entire album. While it does modulate a little bit, it does feel kind of uniform in overall tone and sound, to the point where some of the lesser songs start lacking great melody and start to run together. And as much as I do like his vocals, I'm not sure James Fogarty really helps this. He is imposing. His upper register melodic runs on Mysteries of the Constellations and Towards the Black Surreal, they're awesome, and his growl vocals occasionally do split things up, but he also doesn't quite modulate enough to avoid some of these issues. And particularly on the back half of Transmission KRS, it can feel like the main guitar or synth melody can get a little bit lost behind the riffs, which is a damn shame because the melodic interplay, especially with the bass guitar, is an undersung strength of this album. There's a lot of complexity here that I appreciate. Of course, the other big unsung strength is the writing. I've always appreciated the detail-oriented approach in the Woods' lyricism, and this album definitely holds up as well. Thematically breaking free of an ignorant world and searching the dark cosmos for the pure strains of enlightenment, that's not exactly revolutionary in metal, and especially progressive metal, but it's the details I really like here. Take the Recalcitrant Protagonist, which explores the thought experiment of not being the main actor in your own story, seeing your supporting cast evolve into archetypes, and not feeling you have any control to step away from the stage, and yet there's still a sneaking feeling of obligation to the wider audience, the sort of complex, layered metaphor about human interaction that I love to see explored. Or take the Cave of Dreams, which falls into similar patterns of finding the light away from ignorant shadows of superstition and failed belief, but note that when our protagonist steps toward that pure light, he casts a shadow behind him, leaving any who might come after him to face the very same struggle. And that lingering obsession to find that pure enlightenment is deftly framed across this album, especially if it's driven from within. If you internalize your own gods, what becomes your devils but subsuming to anybody else? But it's very telling how much that selfish drive for pure enlightenment can take a bleak toll on that person. And In the Woods never shy away from framing the consequences, at the very end leaving open the question that if you would give your life for it after casting aside your relationships or your friends. It's actually kind of chilling stuff, especially given the framing, and it really fits that melancholic tone of the album. But that being said, there are a few songs that could have used sharper or more defined stakes. Well, specifically the transitional Cult of Shining Stars or the abandonment of This Dark Dream. They're not badly written songs by any stretch, but they're merely good, while some of the others are really great. But overall, yeah, I dug this album. Yeah, I kind of went in looking for more experimental metal or black metal, and I can't really say this album fits the bill for either, but that's more because it's entirely in its own lane and sound. Difficult to define, but such a definitive entity as it is. It's not perfect, it runs a little bit long, the melodies could afford to hit a little bit stronger, there are some points that could be tightened, but it's still pretty damn close to great, getting a very light 8 out of 10 from me, and definitely a recommendation. Yeah, I know, I'm late to the punch with this, and yeah, it's not really black metal, I still recommend it definitely. Now I'm on to find some more black metal, so we'll see what happens. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I know, I'm late to the punch with this, but I am happy I covered it. It's a pretty damn great album. I got the poll up here, so what'd you guys think? I'm definitely curious, especially with your opinions in relation to their earlier work. But beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, or any other black metal albums that you think would be more of my vein with a little bit more atmosphere, I'm definitely all ears. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.